Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, How to Find and Fix the Skill Gaps That Matter Most at Scale. I'd like to start by thanking today's sponsor, Capsim. Capsim is on a mission to build immersive and insightful simulation technology that helps tomorrow's workforce gain the experience and feedback needed to grow and succeed. I'm Jess Thompson, Content Manager for Learning and Development at ATD, and I will be your moderator for today. I'm very pleased to introduce today's presenter, Matt Schell. Matt Schell is a Senior Business Development Manager at Capsim Management Simulations, where he assists corporate clients and authors with simulation-based training solutions. Over the last 4 years, Matt has worked with organizations worldwide to hire and develop talent by assisting in creating custom inbox simulations. We have an exciting presentation lined up for you today. Please chat your comments and questions throughout the presentation. And now, without further ado, Matt.
Thank you very much there, Jess. I'll go ahead and share my screen here now. Make sure everybody can see that. There we go. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name again is Matthew Schell. I'm Senior Business Development Manager here at Capsim Management Simulations. And it's great to, of course, again, partner with the Association for Talent Development for today's webinar. And we have quite the session in store for you today, because I'm, of course, excited to share with you all how you can find and fix the skills gaps that matter most at scale. And to do so, I'd like to start off by examining just some of the trends and challenges, both old and new, that we're currently facing in talent development, and then share a bit of Capsim's perspective on the core attributes of an effective L&D strategy. And then in the latter half of the session, I'd like to introduce you to the concept of inbox simulations, which are these scalable, highly interactive, and completely customizable day-on-the-job experiences, and be able to demonstrate that with some practical real-world success stories. But by the end of today's session, you're going to see firsthand how these immersive, easy-to-use experiences have helped organizations, both large and small, to identify skill gaps accurately, and in doing so, take a much more individualized, a more efficient, and quite frankly, a more data-driven approach to developing their most important resource, being, of course, their people. But before we jump in, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the agenda that we'll cover today. And to start, I'll just share with you a few key takeaways from today's session, and then I'll briefly describe who we are at Capsim if you're perhaps unfamiliar with us. And from there, we're going to jump right into a look at the current training environment with a brief look at some of those factors contributing to the future of work and how this is only increasing the need to upskill and reskill employees. And then we'll review some interesting statistics on the importance of developing soft skills as well. And then after that, we'll share some challenges that we at Capsim have identified and we believe must be addressed in order to train the right people on the right skills in the right way. And then from there is where I'll introduce you to the way forward with these new experiential assessment technologies we refer to as inbox simulations. And we'll have a pair of fun interactive moments where you can see how these work firsthand, while also describing how the unique approach of these inbox sims addresses many of the challenges we do face today. But from there, I'll be excited to share with you 3 different success stories from companies that have directly benefited from these inbox simulations in a variety of forms and use cases. Everything from skill gap analysis to being able to empirically measure the impact of their trainings. And then as we near the end of today's session, we'll close by sharing with you all a few ways where you could try these simulations risk-free with your colleagues. And of course, we'll spend at least 5 to 10 minutes towards the end answering any questions. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and get started. And I'll start by, of course, speaking to the goal of today's session, the main takeaway, if you will. And really, my goal here at Capsim, as Jess described, is to help training and development professionals such as yourselves with developing your learners by really helping you identify and building on their core strengths, while also prioritizing skill development where it's needed most. And the way we'll demonstrate that is, again, through these immersive kind of custom assessment tools that mirror a day on the job at your unique company and provide you with the empirical data to objectively assess skills, measure those training impacts, and potentially help streamline succession planning within your organization as well. So for the next 40 minutes, my goal is to get you to believe that inbox simulations, these small bite-sized experiences, are really the key to elevating and evaluating the effectiveness of your training initiatives. And I'm going to show you how these solutions can make it very simple for you to achieve that result by simply sharing with you how major companies have already done so. But you may be thinking, okay, why us at Capsim? How are we specifically qualified to speak on the topic of finding and fixing these skills gaps? Well, the answer is pretty straightforward. We've been doing it for nearly 4 decades at this point. And as a global leader in simulation-based trainings and assessment, we've assisted companies from Fortune 50s all the way to small companies with developing business acumen and strategic thinking in a lot of their leaders. But really what I would say differentiates us compared to other simulation training companies is that we've also been a leader in the assessment arena going back to about 2006. And really the primary way we've assisted our clients there is with these objective and authentic sim-based assessments to help them identify emerging leaders within their company so we can help put them on the fast track for development. And really, I'd say it's this infusion of the science-backed approach of experiential learning that simulations offer, combined with these valid assessment models that have led to a lot of our clients' success, and some of which you can see on screen, and some of which we'll even talk about here in a little bit. But to kick things off, I'd love for you all to take part in a quick example of how simulations can assess key skills like communication that are typically hard to measure. And what I'd like to do is pose the following scenario to you all that I'm sure you can all relate to, or perhaps you've even directly experienced. So I want you to sit back and imagine you've just received the following email from one of your direct reports. And I'll go ahead and read it here. It's from Brendan Tangen. He's a marketing associate on your team. And he says, thank you again so much for choosing me as the recipient of the Service Excellence Award. It means so much to me, and working here for the past year has been incredibly exciting. I also want to let you know that I really appreciate the positive feedback on my job performance during our last one-on-one meeting. Now, we've also talked about taking on more responsibility. And this morning, Sanjay told me that we might have a chance to expand our business to a very large and distinguished client. Now, I know that I haven't done a presentation for a client this big just yet, but I'd love the chance to tackle this challenge. Let me know what you think. So, pretty innocuous email, right? But what exactly would you do here? So we got a couple different options, and I'd love to get your opinion in the chat here in a moment of what you would do in this scenario. Would you, A, allow Brendan to attend the presentation in order to learn the ropes? B, explain that this is simply too big of an opportunity to use somebody without more experience? Or C, ask him to create a draft of the presentation to give to the team for feedback? So I'll go ahead and give you all a moment there. I'd love to hear your inputs in the chat here. Seeing a lot of results come in, really like the engagement here. This is great. And I'd say we definitely have consensus here, seeing an overwhelming response to option C. Now, whenever we're looking at something like this, of course, we want to look at the research of Iowa psychologists. We've got a plethora of research from half a century about how to best manage an organization and bring the most out of our people, all, of course, rooted in scientific research. But in this case, I would definitely agree with the consensus of the group that in this case, option C would be the most effective. And while I'd love to hear all of your perspectives, I'll go ahead and share with you mine. I would say that this is the most effective response because in doing so, it puts Brendan at the forefront of leading by example, right? By building the first draft of this presentation, he's got involvement from the onset and he's tied directly to the end result. So especially if the efforts are successful, if they bring on this new client, not only was he a core part of that process, but he's also getting the feedback he's eager to receive by demonstrating that to the team early on. So kudos to you all out there. And the reason I like to share this email in particular, this scenario at the start, is because it demonstrates one thing very well. It's that it's the small, subtle ways that we communicate, the way that we problem solve, the way that we work as a team, that can lead to very large impacts in an organization. And this is particularly relevant today in the more digitalized and in many cases, remote work atmosphere we find ourselves in, where digital correspondence is quickly becoming the primary way we communicate. And as an example, I'm sure all of you can relate to at least one situation or maybe even two or three where context or tone was lost via digital correspondence like email or instant messages. But how exactly do you train individuals and build up these skills, the subtle ways of effective communication at scale? Well, I personally think that L&D has a great opportunity here. But let's start by expanding on this just a bit more by looking at the current environment we're operating in and the role L&D has and can play in the future. Because personally, I think that this is the perfect opportunity now to demonstrate how effective L&D initiatives are quickly becoming pretty much a competitive advantage at companies at this point. And the answer is pretty clear cut as to why. In that finding and fixing the skills gaps in your company is absolutely critical because your people are, again, your greatest resource. Not only are they representing your company, but they are instrumental in executing your strategy. And what makes this true is that skills gaps in an organization determine how your people perform on the job, collaborate with their colleagues, and interact with customers. And the importance of this has only been compounded by this increase in virtual work we've been seeing the last few years. But also, there's a benefit to developing these skills, of course, because in doing so, it gives your learners this career durability where they can more easily acquire the skills, the knowledge, and ultimately the mindset needed to be an engaged and productive member of the team. And to illustrate this further, think about the communication example we just went through. The quality of communication directly impacts relationships, which in turn determines the quality of your organization. And having the ability to have genuine, adept and informed conversations will, of course, enhance the connection between employees and obviously lead to a more healthy corporate culture in an organization that's, capable and successful in executing and reaching those goals. This is something I'm sure, of course, many of you already know, and it's something we've certainly learned by working with our clients over the years. But I would say the future of work is creating some new challenges while also exacerbating existing ones due to the way that we're seeing this quick shift in the modern business environment, the landscape, if you will. And I think this is going to require us to realign training to kind of meet some of these new realities in the business world and reevaluate some of the existing methods or finding new ways to address some of these challenges. So let's go ahead and break this down one step further by just analyzing one newer development that's changing the way that we work. And I'm sure that you've all been hearing about it. And that, of course, is the role that rapid leaps in technology are playing in that changing way that we work. Take, for instance, a topic that's made quite an impression over the last few months. It's hard to have not heard about it at this point. And that is these generative AI models like ChatGPT, Bard, and many others, right? Here's a solution capable of automating repetitive tasks and providing instant access to fairly nuanced and informed info. And I could personally say, I've used these tools. They certainly have increased my efficiency and productivity in a variety of ways. And I think this can be true for L&D as well. Think of how a technology such as this could lead to more personalized training, more individualized coaching. It can not only increase the engagement with your trainings, but improve the quality of that virtual collaboration and communication we were just speaking to. Or perhaps it could be used as a stepping stone to a more data-driven decision-making approach. All of these things are, of course, things that we are Capsim are actively exploring and, in due time, of course, but it's important to note that we are still fairly early in this process with these types of technologies. And at this point, they are a tool, not a be-all, end-all solution, at least at the moment. So we talked a little bit about technology, but what about its role when it comes to upskilling and reskilling of employees? Well, they've only increased the need. In fact, I was just looking at the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report. It was just released on April 30th. That showed me an astounding statistic that 60% of the global workforce is going to need to either be upskilled or reskilled before 2027. It's an alarming stat, no doubt. But again, I also see an opportunity here. Could these same types of disruptive technologies like generative AI or even inbox simulations, which we'll hit on later, be used to upskill the workforce to stay competitive in a very changing global environment? Well, I believe so, because as these technologies advance, the skills required to perform existing roles are going to change dramatically. I think it's going to lead to a new race for that competitive advantage that I alluded to a bit earlier. And additionally, at the same time, we're going to have new job roles and responsibilities that are going to emerge and they're going to require entirely new specialized skills as well as knowledge. So really the core point I'm trying to hit here is that it's really continuous learning that can be crafted and customized and implemented quickly. That's really going to be key to a lot of companies staying ahead of that curve. But we've been talking a little bit about newer challenges, and I think it's still worth noting that there are still some existing ones that we need to consider, going back to the importance of key career skills like soft skills, interpersonal skills. And as I'm sure you all know, soft skills have long been a topic of discussion for development in both new and existing employees. I mean, we're of course talking about, again, the effective communication methods, being able to problem solve, and to be able to adequately work within a team to have cohesion there. And this has been a trend for some time. I mean, you can go back and look at Bloomberg job skills reports from a decade ago, or the Future of Jobs report through WEF that I just mentioned, or ATD's own reports. And they always indicate that the most sought after, yet least common skills that they're finding in both, again, new and existing employees are those soft skills like communication and teamwork. And as tech like generative AI begins to take over more repetitive and more routine tasks, it's my belief that the focus is going to shift to more complex, more nuanced roles that require increased human interaction, increased creativity, and more decision making, which only increases the need for that clear and concise communication, critical thinking, and the ability to work within teams. But what I would say is a newer development, particularly over the last 5 years or so, is that many are now saying that effective soft skills are now just as important, if not more so, than technical knowledge or hard skills, if you will. In fact, you look at a LinkedIn Learning report from 2019, found that 92% of hiring and training professionals say that soft skills now matter more than hard skills. And to take that one step further, if you look at Monster's 2022 Future of Work Global Report, states that 63% of organizations are willing to hire somebody with transferable soft skills first, and then train them up to full proficiency, rather than putting the onus on technical knowledge alone. And you're probably saying, well, why is that? Well, from my perspective, I'd say it's safe to assume that many companies out there feel fairly confident in their ability to develop the hard skills, or the technical knowledge, industry specific or company specific knowledge, right? But honing in on soft skills and developing those, well, it's a bit more challenging. And I think the reason is that knowledge-based learning and skills-based learning are two entirely separate things. And mainly because soft skills are inherently behavioral, meaning that you have to actually apply them to see how proficient you are with them. So in summary, I would say I think it's pretty clear that we're all pretty much on the same page when it comes to the role that technology, upskilling and reskilling, and soft skills are playing in L&D. But let's take this one more step back and look at some perceptions of training from the perspective of the three most important stakeholders in the process. Of course, the learner, executives or management at your company, and of course, the opinion of training and development pros such as yourselves. But let's go ahead and start from the learner's perspective, where we found through Gartner was able to find that 70% of employees say that they don't have the mastery of their skills needed to do their jobs. And you say, well, why is that specifically? Well, it appears to be that there's a knowing doing gap between the training and the application of said training concepts. And the reason I say that is because only 12% say that they apply new skills learned from L&D initiatives into their day-to-day jobs. So we can take a step back and recognize that this concern is shared equally between employees, and that we need to examine why that learning transfer of training is so low. But let's also take a look at this from the executive level, where we found that only 25% in a study from McKinsey, 25% of executives believe that training efforts provide a positive and measurable improvement of performance, which hints at not just a gap in applying the training, but also the ability to effectively measure the impact and communicate that impact as well. So really the bottom line is we need to be more data driven, and we'll hit on that a little bit further into the presentation too. But of course, there is one more perspective that's missing here, and that's of course yours as training professionals. So what we did at Capsim was we wanted to get your thoughts on the matter with our pre-webinar survey questions. And it was very clear that basically all of you are very in tune with these challenges, and we saw some very interesting results from the survey. In fact, we found that 81% of you stated that the developing a data-driven learning strategy is a priority, if not the top priority for your team right now. However, we did see some converse results with the next statistic, where 2/3 of you are saying that your existing assessment methods are not providing access to the quality data you need to be able to maximize that training impact. So in summary, our current methods are coming up a bit short. Or more specifically, the tools or assessments that we're using are not really aligned with the needs of today's business environment, which is what these statistics and your thoughts would should suggest as well. And that's what we've been specifically trying to address here at Capsim. And that's exactly what we've been doing. We've been trying to create immersive experiences that address many of the challenges that we've been discussing thus far. So that way it allows us to focus on developing the right people with the right skills in the right way. And as a quick example of that, I would say, I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, knowledge is power. But I would suggest we augment that just a bit to say, knowledge is potential. And what I mean by this is think of it in the way of a job interview, for instance. I mean, you may ask questions to a candidate to see if they have the knowledge to be effective in a role, but does that mean they can practically apply that knowledge? Or do they simply have the potential? Or another way to think about this a little bit more tangible, I mean, think about it in the case of professional athletes. Do we measure their abilities based on their knowledge of the game or their skills on the court or the field? Well, I would certainly say it's the latter. So how exactly do we bridge that gap from knowledge to application? Well, let's take a look at what we at Capsim have identified as kind of the three key attributes that we believe are really necessary to a winning L&D strategy. And the first challenge we'll look at is that in order to find and fix skills effectively, you of course need to be data-driven, meaning you can't improve what you can't measure. I mean, think about it in the context of a road trip. How do you know how far you traveled if you don't know where you started? Therefore, we need to be able to identify areas for improvement empirically and make informed decisions based on said data to measure the effectiveness of our training, not just at the moment, but over time as well. Which brings us to our second key attribute, which is in addition to gathering the data, you need to ensure that your training is transformative by making it as experiential and as developmentally focused as possible. This aids not only with the engagement with your trainings, but ensuring your training is as relevant to the learner as it can be by providing them with real-world situations and scenarios where they can practically apply their knowledge. In short, you want to make sure training is mirroring the learner's day in the life as much as possible to make it as impactful as possible. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, and as the title of today's session suggests, your training needs to be scalable by ensuring that these transformative trainings can be implemented anywhere at any time. That way you can meet all of your learners' unique ways of how, when, and more recently, where they choose to work. But to kind of tie all of these attributes together, I'd like to just stress for a moment why I believe simulations in particular are such a great vehicle for addressing a lot of these challenges. And the best way I've found to kind of conceptualize this process is, again, in the context of a sport. I mean, take golf, for example. If I wanted to improve someone's golf game, I could have them describe to me what they're doing and try to provide some suggestions. But is that really effective? Well, ultimately, I would say no, because I'm only hearing it from their perspective. I'm not seeing them do it. If I truly wanted to assist them, I would take them to the closest course. I'd put them on the green, observe them taking some shots, and then provide insight into strengths and weaknesses and offer some more pointed guidance to help them improve. And it's my belief that whether it's business skills, people skills, sports skills, there's really no difference there. So whether you're focusing on skill assessment or skill development or both, it's here where I'd like to introduce you to the way forward and how we at Capsim have been addressing many of these challenges we've been discussing by designing one of the first simulation-based and fully customizable skill assessment platforms that we refer to as in-box simulations. And to start off, of course, I'd be happy to introduce you to exactly what is an in-box simulation. Well, essentially, it's a simulated experience where we put the learner in a day in the job scenario where they could put their skills and knowledge to the test by navigating the very situations that they are most certainly going to experience in their role. And what's important to note here is that, as the name suggests, they're doing so in a simulated email platform that virtually all of us use every day, making the delivery of the training that much more authentic and that much more familiar and relatable. And really, this allows us for a very straightforward and intuitive experience because it directly addresses one of the challenges we've been discussing. and that they're applying their knowledge in a real world context that reflects their daily roles and tasks. And behind the scenes, you're able to empirically measure the skills that matter most to the role and be provided with all that data in real time. And then after that, you and the learner are both provided with quality feedback immediately after they go through one of these inbox simulations. And what's most important to note is that virtually everything you see within an inbox simulation is customizable. And by creating one of these yourself, you're getting the same science-backed approach that we've used to develop solutions for over the course of 4 decades. But let's take a little closer look at how like an inbox sim operates, which you can see in the animation on screen here. So basically, after logging into the inbox simulation, you've completed a very brief onboarding where we kind of introduce you to the scenario and what you're being assessed on. Then you jump right into the simulation experience where you're reviewing and responding to a variety of emails from fictional internal and external stakeholders, the folks that you already interact with every day. You can investigate situations by looking at supporting documents in a company drive or other communications. And then you can make key decisions, not answer just simple questions, but make key decisions through very nuanced multiple choice responses, multi-answer responses, or my personal favorite, through written responses, so you can really explore the nuances of someone's own decision-making process. And as learners respond, they're going to see the consequences of their actions, whether they're positive or negative, in real time due to the branching logic going on behind the scenes, which I'll share with you in a moment. And after all these emails have been responded to, the learners are prompted to exit the experience, and both they as the learner and the administrator can see individualized and comparative results in real time to help identify those key strengths and identify the most significant areas in need of improvement. But really, above all else, I would say the key strength when it comes to inbox simulations generally is that it's allowed us to combine the validity of assessments that are among the best predictors of managerial performance and on-the-job performance, generally speaking. And I'm referring to, of course, like in-basket exercises that are commonly used in assessment centers for the last century. But combining that with the science-backed experiential learning approach that simulations are known for, but this time around providing a level of customization that to this point has been unattainable for a lot of individuals that want a more unique and immersive experience. But before I share with you a behind-the-scenes look at how these operates, I'd like to share how we've seen these used as some of our clients generally. And of course, by far, the most common way we've seen inbox simulations implemented is simply to have a scalable way to benchmark key skills, whether they're soft skills, technical skills, even procedural knowledge, across an entire organization. And really allowing companies access to skills data from that individual level all the way to the institution level. However, we've also seen the percentile data from these inbox sims used to identify emerging leaders, to be able to quantify a given training program's current impact, and even as a career pathway tool to show individuals what that next step in their career could really look like and to see if they're ready for that next step. But we've also seen it used in more interesting ways too, like certification or compliance training, kind of a more practical way to see if you understand certain company policies and so on. And one of the more interesting ways too is as a pre-hire assessment, as a candidate screening tool, to kind of show them what a day in the life at your company specifically looks like before they even submit an application. And that way you get to see, rather than just hearing about their knowledge and their skills, get to see it in action. And we'll expand on a few of these, of course, when we talk about some of the success stories in a moment. But now let's go ahead. I'd love to share with you all another interactive example and show you how these work behind the scenes. And to do so, I'd like to take a look at an example from an inbox simulation we created for healthcare administrators recently, where you take the role of a VP of operations at a fictional hospital. And specifically what we're looking at assessing here is one's delegation, leadership, problem solving, and prioritization capabilities. And the example on screen is a bit more serious than the one we started out with, because in this case, we have a scenario where medical tools were not properly sterilized prior to a surgery taking place. And while there's no complications with the patient just yet, the hospital, of course, still needs to respond. So again, in the chat, I'd like to pose to you all the following question of what would you do in this scenario? Would you A, have Jane schedule a root cause analysis meeting immediately? Would you B, kind of delegate it to Jane and say, just, hey, let me know when you need me? Or C, reply to Jane that we need to notify the family right away? And feel free to share in the chat. I'll go and take a look here and see if we have some consensus there. See, quite a bit of responses here. I think we're coming to a consensus pretty quick here again. I do see a couple B's, a couple C's in there. Like the explanation there on option A. Excellent. So we got a good amount of response to this point. I would say we certainly have a consensus around A. But let's go ahead and do a quick debrief of this, and then I can show you kind of what happens depending on what you choose. So in this case, I would agree with the consensus of the group again here, that option A would be the most effective response. Not to say that C or B are ineffective, but I would certainly say that A is a bit more effective than the others. The reason being that in option B, you're kind of essentially avoiding any action. You're kind of delegating it out and just leaving the issue there when this is something fairly critical. And option C, I would say, is certainly still an effective response. So you get some kind of attributes of points in that case, but it's not as effective as option A. And the reason, I'm sure that many of you thought of as well, is that your priority really right now should be trying to get in as much information as possible. I mean, notifying the family is certainly going to be a step in an effective response to this situation, but getting on that phone call, you're going to want to enter it with as much information as you can. And the reason why I love sharing this example in particular is because it shows something that inbox simulations do very well, and that is nuanced assessment. Because in the real world, our actions are rarely, if ever, just correct, incorrect. It's not a binary when it comes to, how we respond to certain tasks. There are varying degrees of effectiveness behind any decision that we make. And Inbox has the ability to really mirror that during the assessment experience. But let's go ahead and take this one step deeper. What happens depending on the way you respond to a given email? Well, what I want to demonstrate here is that there's another real world point to emphasize, and that how you respond to these simulation scenarios in an inbox can have cascading, can have branching effects. Just like the way that you respond to an email in the morning, it can determine subsequent interactions throughout the rest of your day. And that's true with an inbox too. So in this example, if you chose that option A, your next interaction on this topic would be entirely different than if you chose to notify the family immediately. And it's also fun when we have different individuals going through the same inbox like this, because they can end up in different and completely unique experiences. And of course, there's chances for them to course correct and everything within there as well. But let's take a quick moment to kind of summarize some of the benefits of inbox simulations that we've been discussing so far. And let's do this by referring back to some of those attributes of the winning L&D strategy, where in this case, we've identified what we believe are the 3 ingredients that any successful skill assessment tool needs to have. And of course, inbox simulations are really great at addressing. And I would say that the first ingredient that we look for in order to assess these skills effectively is being able to provide relevant, authentic, real-world situations where your learner can practically, again, apply their knowledge. And in my opinion, inbox simulations, of course, do this seamlessly because we're putting learner into a platform that they use every day, and they're responding to situations that are relevant to their day-to-day role. But from there, I would say the second ingredient is the ability to measure the skills that matter most, and that you can empirically measure the impact of your trainings with quantitative and comparative data that these inbox simulations provide. And of course, we'll have an example of this shortly here with Microsoft in just a few minutes. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, when we're referring to that training application gap that I alluded to earlier, is that providing quality feedback as soon as possible is absolutely critical. And with Inbox, we're able to provide individualized feedback pretty much instantaneously on both the key strengths and the areas in need of improvement. But how exactly your inbox simulation is created? Well, I'd be happy to briefly allude to how we do that here. We have a web-based authoring platform that allows us as well as our clients to create their own inbox simulations in just a few hours' time. And again, everything from the skills that you're looking to assess or competencies as well, to the role of the scenario and the learner experience, and of course the emails themselves that they're interacting with, which when we work with companies, they're always based off of the real world experiences of people in the organization that are already doing a phenomenal job. And this platform makes it really easy to modify existing materials, such as click-through modules or quizzes that you have, to make them into very interactive and high fidelity simulations. But really, at the end of the day, we want to make it as intuitive as possible. That way you're focused more on the content of your training as opposed to how do I use this tool. In fact, our mantra basically is if you can write an email, then you can write an inbox simulation. And it's at this point where I like to start shifting gears to show you how a few organizations have done just that by sharing a couple of success stories. And what these success stories will demonstrate is not just the variety of use cases that inbox simulations can be implemented in, but also their unmatched ability to create custom simulations to assess the skills that matter the most to your industry or your organization specifically. Therefore, you're going to hear everything from how individuals implemented ready-to-use solutions that hit on key competencies like business management, supervisory skills, ethics, and time management. But you also learn how our clients have created their own experiences or partnered with us to do so. So from everything from skill gap analysis to measuring training impacts empirically, I'd like to share with you all the following 3 success stories of L&D challenges that the companies on screen all faced, how inbox simulations were implemented to address those challenges, and then share the key outcomes that we achieved with each. And to start things off, let's take a look at Caterpillar and how they implemented one of our ready-to-use business management inbox sims to objectively measure soft skills in their sales managers. And as I'm sure many of you already know, Caterpillar is an Illinois-based construction manufacturing company. They're essentially the global leader in the manufacturing and sale of large-scale construction equipment. And really what Caterpillar sought to do was develop the sales capabilities of their dealers around the globe. And to do so, they partnered with Rutgers University's longstanding and globally recognized executive education program. And the two partnered to create a phenomenal 10-month online training, appropriately titled the Sales Management Certification Program. And while this award-winning program had already been an astounding success for the better part of a decade, they, of course, were always trying to strive to iterate and improve upon it, particularly with how they were assessing soft skills, communication specifically, of their sales managers around the globe. And that's when a few years ago, we partnered with the facilitators of this program to implement this ready-to-use business management inbox simulation that provided them with the exact data they needed to objectively measure these key skills. But you're probably asking, well, what sort of data were you able to provide? How did it really help them? Well, as each learner completed this inbox simulation, they were immediately provided with a report that you see on screen with 4 primary areas of feedback. First off, we provided each individual with their overall performance by percentile to see how they stacked up against other learners. However, the cool thing was that we were not only able to provide their comparison to other learners within the program, but to the world at large. So that way they could see how they paired up against tens of thousands of others that have gone through these inbox simulations. But from there, we provided them with a developmental index that speaks to how well they selected the most effective responses in these different simulation scenarios, and then contrast that with the consistency of that proficiency during the simulation experience. And then from there, we drilled down even further to look at how perceived skill levels related to reality. And the way that we did that is by presenting the learners with a very brief self-assessment just prior to the simulation, where we asked them to rate their proficiencies on a percentile scale against their peers. And then what we did is we directly compared those self-rated scores, or the percentile scores, with the percentile data of the simulation to provide 2 more points of feedback. And this begins with a self-awareness level gauge on a scale of 0 to 6, where higher scores indicate that their perceived skills are very much in tune with reality, and where lower scores indicate that there may be some over or underestimation of their capabilities, particularly with overestimation, where we see effects like the Dunning-Kruger effect, for those of you that are familiar, where we have a tendency to overestimate our capabilities, just generally speaking. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, and really at the core of today's session, is being able to simply visualize the skill gaps. So that way we can not only highlight an individual's key strengths, but that way we can be much more targeted, much more acute in the areas that need that further improvement. So not as much a scattershot approach as much as a more targeted approach. And as a result, Caterpillar and Rutgers were able to implement a short kind of immersive skill gap simulation essentially overnight And while at the same time being provided with global percentile data, that way they could benchmark these sales managers in an effort that was entirely self-directed, so very little admin involvement. And in terms of outcomes, this has allowed them to make their training initiatives even more impactful and accelerate the development of these individuals by really knowing exactly the areas that they need to focus on right at the start of the program. So just a quick example of how these inbox simulations have been used to objectively measure key soft skills. But let's take it a step further and show you specifically how it can measure training impacts empirically with our next success story, where we'll explore our work with Microsoft last year who implemented inbox simulations in a pre-test, post-test format. And really, as a company that needs no introduction, Microsoft knows firsthand the benefits of experiential learning. But they did have a specific challenge for us. They wanted to empirically measure skill development at the beginning and the end of a brand new Journey to Principal training community that was comprised of some of their highest ranking engineers, the top 1% to be exact. And they wanted to see if these individuals were ready to take the next step in their career to be people managers, supervisors, as these were all individual contributors at this point in time. But there was one other curveball that Microsoft threw at us. They wanted to do this synchronously, virtually, with quite a few participants spread out across 14 different countries and 3 different continents. But the nice thing is with inbox simulations, it was a 1-2-step process, being, of course, that pre and post test. Because you see, Microsoft was able to utilize some of our ready-to-use simulations, particularly ones on business management and, of course, people management, looks at supervisory competencies, to assess a multitude of core leadership skills. So we're talking, again, things like organization, problem solving, and, of course, leading. And what we did was we had them complete the first simulation, the pre-test, right at the beginning of the training community. And then again, at a critical stage towards the end of the community, where they took that second inbox on people management style competencies. And what this did was, in a post-test, basically show the empirical longitudinal development of these individuals over the course of this multi-month program. And not just from the individual level, but to the group as a whole. And for even a company like Microsoft, this was entirely new to them. But I'll let the program lead and team manager, Jim Chismar, who says it best in that it's the ultimate validation of your training efforts to be able to say, here's where we were and here's where we are now. And he goes on to say that most training at Microsoft is technical. Makes sense. Where it's easy to see that change. But with Capsim Inbox, you can see these results even when they're not technical and right in your face. And as a result, these future leaders received an immediate skill gap analysis right at the beginning of this training community. And they were able to quantify their development over the course of several months by the end of the program with that post-test. But it doesn't stop there, because these individuals have the opportunity, if they'd like, to go through these inbox simulations again at certain points in the future. And we're going to be able to track that skill development all the way back to the first time they went through an inbox. And in terms of outcomes, the best results we could ever hear is that I'm, of course, happy to say that as of the results of this program and the inbox simulations involvement, that several of these individuals have indeed been selected for that next step in their career to be principals at Microsoft. And this is all done by simply pinpointing, again, the proficiencies at the start and then later on at that pre-post test. But I'd say the biggest takeaway for Jim and the Microsoft L&D team is that they're able to use all of this collective data so that way they can iterate on the program to make it even better going on into the future. So now you've seen a couple of immediate ways you can implement inbox simulations, but what if you wanted to go the route of like a custom simulation? What if you want to create a simulation that's set directly within your company? Well, that's where our next and final success story comes in, where we just wrapped up a project earlier this year with one of the world's largest military defense contractors to create an inbox simulation completely custom just for them. And while I'm excited to share the story with you, of course, we have de-identified this in our client's interest for today's session. But really what this company was looking to achieve with this custom simulation demonstrates why customization generally and inbox simulations and honestly training and assessments in general are so important. Because they wanted a simulation set in a fictionalized version of their own firm that specifically assessed employees' fundamental understandings of project management. And the skills that they wanted to assess, well, they were pulled directly from long established performance indicators that were a part of these PM's annual reviews. And because this company was so unique, we worked directly with internal subject matter experts, again, the people that are already doing a phenomenal job, to bring their real world experiences to life in the simulation. And we were able to do that in just a few months' time. And all we needed to do for this, and it's the same for our clients that author on their own, is simply determine, again, those skills or competencies that they wanted to assess, in this case related to project management, define the scenario and how much background information that the participant needs to have context on what they're being assessed on. And then from there, we're simply generating a few fictionalized versions of internal and external stakeholders that are the delivery method for these simulation stimuli, the emails and instant messages. And then we finally put it into the authoring platform, and then we were right off to pilot testing to establish our sample group. And now they have basically a custom way to assess hundreds of program managers across the globe at scale with a very customized yet still standardized experience. And the way that they review those results is via an admin portal like you see here on screen, where you get some aggregate scoring for a given group or cohort, both the overall percentile as well as averages for each of the skills or competencies you're assessing. And additionally, they can go down into the course roster to see real-time results for each individual as they complete the experience. So everything, again, from that percentile score to self-awareness levels, if and when they completed the assessment, how long it took them. And of course, we do have a developmental aspect to this as well, where they can create IDPs, individual development plans, that can be edited and reviewed by the administrator as well to get some more additional feedback on. And of course, everything easily exportable, integrate with an LMS, for instance. But in short, this client is now receiving all that empirical data they were looking for on the right skills. That way, get to develop the right people, again, in the right way by being much more targeted. So as a result, they walked away with a 45-minute custom simulation assessment to assess those project managers at multiple levels of their career. It was entirely set within the company and developed within just a few months' time. It's a highly relevant experience where they get instant access to the data on these PMs. And now they're even considering modifying this into a hiring tool for candidate screening for new employees. And again, this is just one example of a custom project created by us or our clients. And I hope this serves inspiration for all of you that might want to make an inbox simulation of your own. But with the conclusion of this success story, we do move towards the close of today's presentation. But first, let's kind of bring it home by addressing the challenges we started out with when it comes to finding and fixing those skills gaps at scale. And first is that in order for learning to be effective, you need to immerse the learner in authentic real-world experiences that mirror their day-to-day life. And inbox simulations are a great vehicle for this because it's via a platform that they interact with, of course, every day. Secondly, you can only improve what you can measure, and it has to be an accurate measurement as well. And inbox simulations can provide you with all the empirical data you need to identify those key strengths and, again, those prioritized improvement areas as well. And just as important as the data itself is that you need to provide quality feedback, individual feedback to the learners as soon as possible to increase that learning transfer. And then from there, they have the chance, of course, to create their own action plans, to take their own self-directed approach to their development. And of course, being able to assess the progress of their skill development over time by having them repeat the assessment in, say, like that pre and post test case that we shared with Microsoft. But of course, we want to give all of you the chance to see the benefits of these inbox simulations firsthand. So first off, we're more than happy to let any of you try any of the ready-to-use inbox simulations that we mentioned earlier, completely risk-free, anything from business management, people management, ethics, or time management. Of course, happy to share those. Or maybe you want to take a stab at creating your own custom simulation. We're happy to provide you complimentary access to the authoring platform I alluded to. And of course, you can always discuss partnering with us if we could create a solution for you as well. All we ask is for a brief call and we can connect afterwards to get your thoughts. But what's unique about this particular session today is we'd like to go one step further and provide a first of its kind opportunity for ATD's audience today. So if you like what you've seen over the course of the session, you can see the potential, but perhaps you don't have the time and resources to start creating yourself, or perhaps you have a very pertinent need that you're trying to address right now. Well, either way, we've got you covered because we'd like to offer you all an accelerated way to demonstrate the benefits of these custom inbox simulations by sharing with you what we call the Capsim Inbox Launchpad, where we can create a custom proof of concept for you to demonstrate how an inbox simulation can be crafted for your specific company and to address your specific needs. And the best part is it's entirely risk-free and it takes less than an hour of your time. And by simply speaking with us, you'll walk away with a custom simulation that you can pilot internally in as little as a week's time. Now, of course, this offer is going to be exclusive for anyone that registered for this webinar. And we'll be creating these on a first come, first served basis in the order that we should receive requests. However, by attending here today, you're going to get first access to this before we send it along with the recording and slide deck to everybody via email. And of course, we're more than happy to discuss inbox with everyone, but really this offer we designed for those that really have a pressing need or a challenge, either internally or maybe with a client you're working with right now. That's something you want to address, like role-specific training or benchmarking soft skills. We're more than happy to work with you on one of these. And after your review, should you decide to take it further and create it yourself or collaborate with us, you already have a solid foundation to start from to get you up and running in no time. And how do you take part in this? Easy as 1, 2, 3. All you need to do is simply scan the QR code with your camera on your phone on the next slide, or respond to our email that will be going out shortly after today's session. The first step, simply schedule a call with me personally, where we can discuss your needs, and I'll just have a few pointed questions for you to help determine the scope of this custom proof of concept. And then from there, within a week of our meeting, I'll personally provide you with a short custom proof of concept, providing you and your colleagues with another week or so to review the simulation. And then from there, we just again ask that we have a quick debrief call. We'd love to get your thoughts. And if you wanted to move forward, I can always detail what the next steps look like from there. And again, the best part about all this is it's totally risk-free. So really just want to share with all of you the benefits that we at Capsim and our clients have seen with these new technologies. So in closing, if you'd like to take part in this offer, again, feel free to simply scan that QR code in the bottom left of the screen, and you can schedule a call with me directly. We'll also be sending over the slides from today's session to you all via email, and you can connect with me that way as well. But in closing, I would really like to thank you all for your time today. I hope you found today's session to be beneficial to you, and as well as the unique new technology. And I'd like to personally thank the ATD team for having us for today's session. And at this time, I'd be happy to take a break here and answer any questions from the audience. Jess, how are we looking?
We have a lot of questions for you, Matt, so I'll go ahead and get started.
Absolutely.
So the first question is, you mentioned the inbox being compatible with an LMS. Is that through API only, or are there XAPIs that the inbox can send to an LRS?
Excellent question. There are a variety of ways that we can integrate. As far as specifics go, I always want to make sure that I rely on the experts on our IT team to relate that to you directly. But in short, we can do those style integrations. It just comes down to more of a quick conversation between our two IT teams. But in short, yes, we can.
Great, thanks, Matt. In the report, you mentioned comparing the company versus global scale. Does this mean that this was a soft skills course created by Capsim and not branded for soft skills influenced by CAT's company values and behaviors? This was when you were talking about Caterpillar.
Excellent. So yes, this was by our own internal side on our end. We developed these in conjunction with IO psychologists that both test these and create these, primarily through DePaul University here in Chicago. That's how we created them on our side.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Can you share a little bit about the typical development time to create inbox scenarios?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's actually a very straightforward process. The biggest aspect, as you can imagine, is the scope of the project, because I have some clients that create 5 to 10 minute little micro-based learning experiences. And we also do 60, 90-minute simulations as well. So I would say that if you were looking to create like a quick micro learning experience, you could create it in just as little as a few hours time, kind of like what we're doing with the proof of concepts here today. But yeah, I would say it's well within the realm of possibility to create one of these in maybe a week or two at most. Really what it comes down to, again, is having those great subject matter experts that are really translating their war stories into these sorts of simulation experiences. That's the key.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Matt. Can you speak a little to the reporting functionality on the back end of the simulations?
Yes, so there's a couple of different things I can hit on there. So first things first, on the individual side, they get access directly through the dashboard. So immediately once they complete the simulation, they're prompted to exit, and then they have access to that feedback report that you saw, a bit of a stylized version, but we do have some additional, more pointed feedback that comes in on that report. And then from there, of course, we want to translate that feedback into action. So from the next step, there is where they go into the individual development plan builder. We have created a series of developmental tactics to serve as the foundation for the creation of that IDP. And then they can craft and edit that alongside their manager or an HR or a talent representative to help refine that. And then that's usually where the post-test comes in a couple of months later, a couple of weeks later at minimum. And then the reporting will also show that comparative data instantaneously. So as soon as they go through that second simulation, you're going to see that longitudinal results on the dashboard. And on the admin side, you can provide access at the course level or aggregate level results. And then, of course, as far as integration goes, we can export all that data out to you. That way you can kind of slice and dice it the way that you like. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt.
Mhm.
Would Capsim provide training to to one's team on how to author? Sorry,
Oh,
a little tongue-tied there.
no, no worries, no worries. Not just when it comes to authoring, but also to implement these as well. In fact, we'll do everything from share best practices, evaluate your projects that you're working on, share some of the things that work best for us or potentially other clients, but all that absolutely. And then even on the implementation side, when it comes to debriefing the results, obviously a critical component here. A lot of that is self-directed through the platform, but we of course want to leave you well prepared for any questions there. So basically we can get you up to speed on implementing and authoring in just about 2 or 3 hours time, tops.
All right, great. Well, Matt, those are all of our questions for today. I want to thank you again for your time, and I want to thank everyone for your participation and your engagement during today's session. A lot of great engagement, a lot of great questions and interest. And once again, thank you to our sponsor, Capsim, for today's webinar. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
And this concludes today's webinar. We thank you all for attending. The recording will be available at webcast.td.org. We will send all registrants an email tomorrow with this link. Please visit our event calendar to sign up for future webinars at webcast.td.org/events. Have a great day, guys.